Sleep disorders are extremely common. A lot of different types. Again, some people just have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. The parasomnias, these are the things like the vivid dreams where you're acting them out, the REM behavior disorder, as we call it. The sleepwalkers, the sleep talkers. I mean, those are all parasomnias. And then there's a problem of excessive daytime sleepiness, both just as a function of PD, because people with PD often just report feeling ridiculously fatigued all day long. It's just fatigue, fatigue, fatigue. But secondarily, sleep apnea is very common in Parkinson's. And one of the most common symptoms of sleep apnea is excessive daytime sleepiness. Next slide, please. We see a lot of typically just age-related sleep changes. I think the older we all get, the less sleep we actually require. We tend to wake up earlier and earlier. Sometimes it's the Parkinson's motor symptoms that cause the problems, in that people would feel uncomfortable, or they're trying to roll over to change positions, and they're not moving very well, so it's really hard to roll over, and that's what wakes you up or keeps you awake. But there are some primary sleep disorders, one of which is restless leg syndrome. That's very common in Parkinson's. Probably 20% of people with Parkinson's have restless legs, and it can be very disabling if it's not treated. Sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea, is very common in Parkinson's, and it's important to pay attention to some symptoms. And I mean, obviously, if somebody is snoring a lot at night, and whereas they didn't used to, that's kind of a red flag. If the partner is noticing someone gasping for air in the middle of the night, or the patient is waking up in the morning with a really dry mouth or really dry eyes, those are all signs of potential sleep apnea. And as you probably know, sleep apnea by itself, I mean, it doesn't hurt, while it's happening. I mean, the patient doesn't typically know. But long term, it can put a lot of strain on the heart. It can lead to heart attacks and strokes. I think it was the football player Reggie White, the defensive star. I think he played for the Eagles, and maybe was it the Vikings for a while. Or maybe I'm wrong about it. The Vikings. Sorry, the Packers. It was the Eagles and the Packers. But he died about a year after he retired from complications from untreated sleep apnea. So it's important to pay attention to it. Besides all the dangerous parts of it, people with sleep apnea, they tend to be very sleepy during the day because they're waking up, hundreds of times, during the night without even realizing it. So their brain just isn't getting rest. The Parkinson's medications can also mess up sleep. Some make people more sleepy, some actually cause insomnia. So, when people start telling me about sleep issues, then I'll often ask, well, what time do you take your last dose of whatever medications? So we can kind of figure out, is that playing a role or is it not? Next slide, please. The parasomnias, as I mentioned, the dreams, the hallucinations, the REM behavior disorder. There's a high prevalence of RBD in Parkinson's. We think that it may be a preclinical marker of what we call the synucleinopathies, or these are a group of neurologic disorders, such as Parkinson's, and such as multiple system atrophy and Lewy body dementia. Often people start having these kinds of dreams and they're acting them out, 10, 20 years before Parkinson's, or so to speak, ever starts. And so this is something that when we look back, people say, gosh, I used to have that years ago. Next slide, please. Here's sort of a laundry list of some case reports that were published on what we call sudden onset sleep or sleep attacks. The dopamine agonists, Requip or ropinirole or Mirapex or pramipexole, there's a patch called Nupro or rotigotine. The dopamine agonists are the ones that are most closely associated with this sudden onset sleep disorder, where people say they had no warning that they were getting sleepy. They just suddenly fell asleep without warning in a very unusual situation, such as in the middle of a meal, in the middle of a conversation, or while driving, which is frightening. And it can happen. It's thankfully rare. But if anyone ever tells me that they've had an episode like this, I always stop the dopamine agonists, because those are the ones, as you can see listed here, that have been kind of that have been implicated in this. So while it's not common, if someone falls asleep while driving, they don't care how common it is. It can be life threatening to them. So you got to pay attention to that.